Have you ever walked into a room, maybe a stadium right before a huge game, or, I don't know, an old cathedral that's been there for centuries, and you felt something thick?
Thick is a good word for it.
Right. It's not just a vibe. It's not just, excitement or reverence. It's this palpable, heavy pressure.
Almost like the air itself has an intention.
Yes, like it's watching you.
We've all felt that. We call it electricity in a crowd or maybe atmosphere in a church. We usually just dismiss it as a collective mood. But the sources we have today, they sort of throw cold water on that idea. They ask a much more unsettling question. Is that feeling coming from us, or is it feeding off us?
And that is exactly where we're going today. We are unpacking a concept that, honestly, sounds like it's straight out of a sci-fi horror novel. But it's actually rooted in ancient mysticism and pops up surprisingly often in modern fringe research. We're talking about egregores.
It's a term you hear a lot in esoteric circles, often, pretty loosely. But for this deep dive, we need to be precise. Think of an egregore as a massive, invisible energy structure.
Right.
The theory is that it starts as a creation of our own thought, our collective focus, our shared emotion. But once it gathers enough momentum, it kind of takes on a life of its own. It becomes autonomous.
It wakes up.
Exactly. It wakes up and then it gets hungry. It feeds on our attention. It influences our history. And according to the sources we're looking at, it might even be able to modify our DNA.
That is wild stuff. And to guide us through this, we're not reading some sociology textbook. We're looking at a very specific, very unusual set of documents. We've got the logs from investigative hypnosis session.
Right, using something called the Grifasi Method. And this is what makes today's deep dive so unique. We have a transcript with a telepathic support operator, a woman named Lou. She goes into a deep trance specifically to visualize these structures.
And then, this is the crucial part, we have a methodological breakdown by the founder, Grifasi.
And Grifasi doesn't sound like a mystic. He sounds almost like a data scientist.
He really does. He explains the science, or at least the protocol, behind how they filtered these visions to separate, fantasy from fact. So our mission today is twofold. First, we're going to look at what Lou saw. We're going to map the anatomy of these invisible giants, how they supposedly hook into our concerts, our politics, even our love lives.
And second, we have to look at the methodology. How do these researchers claim to separate a genuine energetic phenomenon from, well, just imagination? Because let's be honest, hypnosis can get pretty weird.
It absolutely can.
It's a slippery slope. But that's what makes this so fascinating. It's an attempt to map the unseen world with a protocol. So let's just suspend our disbelief for a bit and look at the architecture of collective thought.
Okay, let's get into it. The visual. Lou, the operator, is asked to look at an egregore. And when I hear thought form, I'm picturing, a static cloud or maybe a ghostly figure. But that's not what she describes at all.
No, it's much more mechanical and dynamic. She sees a whirlwind, specifically a spiral.
A spiral.
Yes, and the movement is key. It's not just spinning around. She describes a suction effect. Think of a vacuum cleaner or maybe a tornado. It's pulling energy downward, straight toward the earth.
A downward spiral. That's a little ominous.
It is. And she notes these aren't just invisible blobs. They have colors, yellows, blues, greens, which she says are different vibrational frequencies.
Okay.
But the detail that really got me, the one that makes it feel less like a cartoon, is her description of the texture. She calls them brush strokes.
Brush strokes. Like in a painting.
Exactly. She says some are wide, some are narrow, they vary in intensity. It suggests they aren't just a natural phenomenon like a cloud. They're constructed. They're painted by force and intent.
So we have this spiraling, suctioning painting of force. But how does this abstract thing actually interact with me? If I'm just walking down the street, how does an egregore get in?
She explains it with a radio frequency analogy. So think about your mind, what they call the mental field. It's in constant fluctuation. It's noisy. You're thinking about dinner, then you're worrying about an email, then you remember a song. It's just static.
My mind is definitely static.
We're all there. So the egregore is like a powerful radio station broadcasting one specific strong signal. And it scans your mental field, constantly listening for a match.
So if I'm angry and there's an anger egregore nearby, our frequencies match up.
Precisely. It hooks into that mental field first. It finds the resonance. But here's where it gets really, a bit disturbing. Once it connects to your mind, it drills deeper. it accesses your emotional field, and then finally it taps into the sexual energy.
It goes straight for the battery pack.
Essentially, yeah. In this framework, sexual energy isn't just about the act of sex. It's that raw, creative life force. It's the fuel tank of the human being.
And the claim here is that this isn't just a passive drain. It's not just sipping your gas. Lucio states that egregores can actually modify your subjective reality.
Yeah, alter your perception, change your memories.
And get this, she claims they can modify human DNA. I had to read that part 3 times. How does a thought form rewrite biology?
She says it's because of that spiral shape we mentioned. I mean, think about the shape of DNA.
The double helix. It's a spiral.
Exactly. She says that the spiral motion of the energy structure resonates with the spiral structure of the DNA helix. It's a kind of geometric resonance. The idea is that the egregore vibrates at a frequency that lets it literally rewrite your code to keep you compatible with it.
That is a terrifying thought. It implies a long-term mood isn't just a mental state. It's a structural rewrite of who you are. You're being terraformed.
Terraformed is a great way to put it.
But does this drain us dry? If I connect to one of these things, am I just going to collapse?
Not usually. A smart parasite doesn't kill its host, right? It wants a steady meal. Lou uses the spaghetti analogy, which I found pretty helpful.
I love this part. It's so weirdly specific, but it stuck with me.
So imagine your life. Your entire timeline is a long, hollow tube. That's you. The egregore represents itself as a single strand of spaghetti running inside that tube, right alongside you.
Okay, I'm visualizing the pasta.
Right. So that strand is just running parallel to your life. It isn't taking everything. It's taking maybe 1 to 5% of your energy, just a little tithe, but it's constant.
A 5% tax on your soul.
You could say that. And the problem is, most of us don't just have one strand. You accumulate these spaghetti strands throughout your life. One for your political party, one for your sports team, one for your religious guilt, one for your workplace stress.
And eventually the tube is just full of spaghetti and there's not much room left for you.
Exactly. You become a carrier for these other agendas.
So that's the biology of it. But then the transcript shifts gears and takes us on a world tour. Because apparently these things aren't just floating around randomly. They're anchored.
Yeah, to geography. This connects to the whole idea of sacredness or territorial identity. The source claims you can anchor an egregore to a place using names, stories, even completely fake legends. As long as people believe the story, the energy structure holds.
Let's look at the map Lou describes. She starts in Europe. And, I mean, given the history there, you can probably guess what she saw.
Oh, yeah. Europe is dominated by the heavy weight of the past. She identifies the Vatican as the largest, most massive egregore in the region, an ancient structure built on centuries of focused belief.
Makes sense.
But she also mentions World War II.
But the war ended 80 years ago. You'd think that energy would have gone away.
Politically, it ended. But energetically, she claims the war created this massive egregore that didn't just vanish when the treaties were signed. It lingered. It kept feeding on the trauma, the guilt, the memory. It's like a smog that never really cleared.
Wow. Okay, then she moves to North America. And this part it was heavy.
It was. She identifies 2 main pillars. One is Wall Street and finance, which, isn't a surprise. But the other is racism, specifically anti-African racism.
And she describes that as an energy structure, not just a social issue.
Right. She sees it as a self-perpetuating machine. And this is the really tragic part. She says it's fed from both sides.
What does she mean by that?
It's fed by the perpetrators of the hate, the anger, the superiority. But she claims it's also fed by the victim's pain and the constant societal focus on the conflict itself. The egregore doesn't care about morality. It just cares about intensity. It feeds on the division.
It feeds on the friction.
Yes, which suggests that as long as the focus stays on the conflict, the structure just keeps eating.
And then down in South America, she saw something totally different. Not war, not finance, but authenticity.
Yeah, a new age egregore. She describes this rising energy structure that feeds on our yearning for connection to ancient roots. Tourism to Machu Picchu, the obsession with shamanism, ayahuasca circles. It feeds on that desperate desire to find something real.
So even our spiritual seeking could be a trap. That's kind of depressing.
According to this framework, yeah. Because the yearning is a form of lack. The thought is, I'm not whole, so I need this ancient site to make me whole. That need is the food source.
Okay, let's cross the ocean. Africa.
Dominated by egregores of colonialism and what she calls white hegemony, she describes it as this heavy energy that enforces a complex of inferiority. It's a psychological weight pressed down on the continent.
And then we get to Asia. specifically China. This, for me, was the most sci-fi part of the whole session. It felt like 1984 meets The Matrix.
The visual changed completely here. She sees Asia as incredibly dense with egregores. Ancient temples, scriptures, strict social rules. But when she looked at the future, or the emerging present, in China, she saw a nameless egregore.
Nameless.
It doesn't have a face or a deity. Its only purpose is to stop fluctuation. Remember how we said the mental field bounces around?
Right, the static.
This egregore wants to stop that. It wants to turn human energy into cubes.
Cubes.
Yeah.
Rectangular molds.
Exactly. She has this vision of a woman in modern China practicing martial arts, something fluid, right? But she sees the woman doing it inside a rectangular geometry for social safety.
What does the rectangle represent?
The goal is to make human energy stackable, storable, and transportable. If everyone's a unique shape, you can't stack them. If everyone is a cube, you can build a wall. It just removes messy individuality.
That is chilling. It's the ultimate conformity machine. Not just behaving the same, but energetically becoming a brick in the wall.
It raises that scary question about efficiency versus humanity. If you remove the fluctuation, you remove chaos, but you also remove life. It's the ultimate hive mind structure.
So we've got cubes in China, racism in America. But the transcript also brings us down to our Friday nights. Loon analyzes 3 common scenarios.
Yeah.
A reggaeton concert, a football match, and a movie theater.
Yeah, this was a fascinating comparison of potency, a little stress test for where we lose the most energy.
I was surprised by the reggaeton one. Why that specifically?
It's the beat and the intent. She says a reggaeton concert creates a massive connection that bypasses the mind entirely. It doesn't ask you to think. It goes straight to the sexual body. It's a direct harvest of that raw creative energy.
Wow. And the football match.
Similar. Hits the emotional body, the tribalism, the highs and lows of the game, and the sexual body. It's visceral. You leave feeling drained because you've poured your vitality into the collective outcome.
But the cinema was safe.
Safer. She said the cinema is only about a 90 to 95% connection.
Only 90%.
Relatively speaking. But she explains it stays mostly in the mental and emotional fields. It rarely taps that deep sexual reservoir. So watching a movie is less draining than being in a screaming stadium.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting.
That's controversial.
The trap of love, because we always think love is the answer. But Lou says, maybe not.
She says we have to be very careful with our definitions. She claims there are egregores of love, but this isn't that unconditional universal love. This is love mixed with jealousy, possession, fear of loss, heartbreak.
So the dramatic, tear-jerking ballad version of love.
Exactly. She warns that entities use the concept of love to create hooks. If you're desperate for love, if you feel incomplete without another person, you're essentially opening a door for an egregore to hook right in.
It plays on that insecurity.
The insight here is that these structures keep humans from realizing their first priority should be self-love and freedom. If you need an external source to feel whole, you're basically food.
That's a radical shift. It makes you rethink those butterflies in your stomach. Maybe that's not love. Maybe that's a feeding tube attaching.
It forces you to ask, is this connection empowering me or is it binding me?
So we have all this pretty scary info. Cubes, vampires, fake love. But then the transcript pivots. We stop hearing from Lou, the telepath, and we hear from Grifasi, the founder. And he basically says, don't believe everything you just heard.
This is the critical thinking pivot, and honestly, it saves the material from being just another ghost story. Grifasi provides the truth filter. He warns about contamination.
Right. He says when you put someone in hypnosis, they aren't a clear window to the truth.
No, they're a filter. The information is contaminated by their own beliefs, the environment, even interfering entities just messing with them. He explicitly says, a single investigative session does not exist.
What does he mean by that?
He means one session proves nothing. He gives this great example. If you ask a telepath, what happened to my grandfather in New York in 1452, and they give you an answer, Grifasi says that's just noise.
Because it's unverified.
It's useless noise, a fabrication, a projection. You can't trust information from just one session.
So how do they find what they call the truth? What's the gold nugget protocol? It's a data science approach to mysticism. He says true research requires hundreds, even thousands of sessions on the same topic with different people. You filter out 99% of the sand, the personal noise, the cultural bias, to find the tiny flecks of gold that repeat across the board.
The pattern. Exactly. If 1,000 people who have never met, who speak different languages, all describe seeing a cube energy in China, then Grifasi would say, okay, that's a gold nugget.
But if only Lou sees it, it's just noise for now.
Precisely. And in this transcript, they're presenting Lou's vision as a starting point, a hypothesis, not as absolute truth. They're saying, this is what she saw. Now let's see if anyone else sees it.
So, assuming even a fraction of this is true, assuming there are invisible spaghetti strands eating my energy, how do we break free? Lou gives some advice at the end.
She does. And it sounds simple, but it's philosophically really deep. She says the key is realizing you are a totally free human being.
But then she mentions the obstacles.
Mm.
And it's not demons or ghosts. She mentions passports.
Yes, passports and tax numbers.
Bureaucracy is the demon. I knew it.
In a way, yeah. She argues these institutional identities, your nationality, your social security number, are the primary hooks that bind you to the massive national egregores.
How does that work?
Well, when you identify as a citizen first and a free soul second, you're submitting to the energy of the state. That identification is the chain. The passport represents your agreement to be part of that structure.
That's profound. We think of freedom as having a passport that lets us travel, but she sees the passport as the leash.
Because it defines you by an external structure. To break that connection, you have to know internally that you exist outside those definitions. You aren't your job, your country, your debt. You're the consciousness experiencing those things.
So what does this all mean for us? We've looked at the spirals, the global map, the methodology. How do we put it all together?
I think the synthesis lies in awareness. The hypnotic visions give us a framework, visuals like the spiral or the cube to understand how influence works. But Grifasi's methodology warns us not to get superstitious about every little detail.
Right.
We shouldn't be afraid of the dark. We should just be looking for patterns.
It's about not being a passive receiver of signals.
Exactly. If egregores are fueled by our attention and our emotional matching, then we have the power. We can choose not to match the frequency.
It changes how you look at a bad mood, doesn't it? If I'm sitting there stewing in anger, I'm not just mad, I'm lunch.
And realizing your lunch is the first step to leaving the table.
I love that. Don't be lunch. So, as you go about your week, whether you're scrolling through financial news or cheering at a game or just feeling that heavy vibe in a room, ask yourself, is this feeling mine? Or am I tuning into a station I didn't mean to play?
And who is listening on the other end?
That's the question. Thanks for diving deep with us today. Keep your shields up, and we'll see you next time.
Stay